Welcome to Money Talks with Cathy Yang, your intel on the Philippine markets and the economy. In the headlines, U.S. President Donald Trump delays Canada and Mexico's tariffs on automobiles for a month. The tariff relief lifts Wall Street. This comes as China vows to boost spending at home. And here in the Philippines, out earlier this hour, unemployment rate rose to 4.3% in January. And local rate cut hopes are up, following even slower inflation. U.S. President Donald Trump faced lawmakers on Tuesday to declare that, quote, America is back. In the longest presidential address to Congress in modern times, Trump doubled down on his decision to crack down on illegal immigration, slashing the federal workforce and impose tariffs on America's largest trading partners. For 100 minutes, he touted his executive orders and taunted opposition Democrats by blaming his predecessor, Joe Biden, of America's problems.
America is back. Regarding the agreement on minerals and security, Ukraine is ready to sign it at any time that is convenient for you. Simultaneously, we've had serious discussions with Russia and have received strong signals that they are ready for peace. Wouldn't that be beautiful? Wouldn't that be beautiful? Since taking office, my administration has launched the most sweeping border and immigration crackdown in American history, and we quickly achieved the lowest numbers of illegal border crossers ever recorded. Thank you. Plants are opening up all over the place. Deals are being made. Never seen. That's a combination of the election win and tariffs. It's a beautiful word, isn't it? That, along with our other policies, will allow our auto industry to absolutely boom.
For their part, Democrats held up signs that read, quote, false in Musk's deals, in reference to Elon Musk, the world's richest man who leads the Department of Government Efficiency. Just minutes after Trump's address began, a Texas lawmaker was escorted out of the chamber for refusing to sit down and shouting, quote, no mandate to cut Medicaid. Makers a 1-month reprieve from tariffs imposed in Mexico and Canada for cars that will comply with the existing free trade agreement between countries and the U.S. The delay was requested by the heads of Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis. White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt says any vehicle produced from Canada and Mexico would be exempted from tariffs as long as it complies with the rules set by the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement signed during Trump's first term.
We are going to give a 1-month exemption on any autos coming through USMCA. Reciprocal tariffs will still go into effect on April 2nd. So the 3 companies that he spoke to are Stellantis, Ford, and General Motors. They requested the call, they made the ask, and the president is happy to do it. It's a 1-month exemption. He told them that they should get on it, start investing, start moving, shift production here to the United States of America, where they will pay no tariff. That's the ultimate goal.
China's parliament begins its week-long assembly with a simple message to its 1 billion people: spend more. Premier Li Qiang admits that intense efforts will be needed to reach the 5% GDP target amid sluggish household demand, the unraveling of the property sector, and a trade war with the U.S. Beijing has expanded the social safety net to encourage spending, but other details to reverse its economic fortunes remain unclear.
Internationally, the external environment is becoming more complex and challenging, which may have a greater impact on China's trade, technology, and other sectors. Domestically, the foundation for economic recovery remains unstable, with insufficient effective demand, difficulties in production and operations for some enterprises, and pressure on job creation and income growth. The economic growth target is set at around 5%, balancing the need to stabilize employment, manage risks, and improve livelihoods while being supported by China's economic growth potential and favorable conditions.
Let's take a look at how global markets reacted following a number of business news from tariffs to China to inflation. The U.S. markets rallied Wednesday after the White House granted a one-month tariff exemption in automobiles. The Dow and the S&P 500 are up by about 1% each, and the tech-heavy NASDAQ rose by 1.5%. And looking at the U.S. futures markets, all indexes pointing downwards. The Dow and the S&P down by about 0.1%, and the NASDAQ falling by about 0.3%. Signaling a lower open in the U.S. markets later today. As for European markets, we're also up on Wednesday. Take a look at those. The prospects of a tariff compromise and Germany's spending plans have lifted investor mood. The stock 600 is up about 0.9, nearly 1% there. The DAX index is also up by about 3%. London's Financial Times Stock Exchange is one of the few laggards, closing the session down by just about 0.1%. And Germany's DAX is up by over 3%. The country's next government there aims to reform its fiscal rules to allow higher defense and infrastructure spending. Now, the delay in auto tariffs have pushed Asian markets this Thursday to open mostly higher. As you can see there, South Korea's Kospi is up by about 0.6%. On a side note, Seoul's inflation rose in February by 2% year-on-year. And Japan's Nikkei 225 there has also risen by about 0.75%. ASX 200, the lone laggard there on this screen, it's down about 0.5%. Let's take a look at the Philippine markets and see how the PSEI has opened in the last 6 minutes of trading, seeing a gain there of about 0.25%. We're trying to hit the 6,200 level there. We're at 6,139. The stock market rose yesterday by about 1% because of the lower inflation rate. Let's take a look at the peso, see how that's doing. A lot stronger than the last one, opening at 57.25. We've closed at 57.34 to the dollar. On Wednesday trading. And let's take a look at that live shot at the media conference now going on at the Philippine Statistics Authority, where earlier this hour, Deputy National Statistician Divina Gracia del Prado announced Philippine employment data in January rose to 4.3%. The country's unemployment rate rising to 4.3% in January from 3.1% in December 2024. This means there are over 2 million unemployed Filipinos in January, which is higher than in December. Meanwhile, when we take a look at job quality, that worsened. The underemployment rate rose to 13.3% from 10.9% in December. This means there are over 6 million Filipinos who are employed but seek additional jobs or work hours, which is also higher than in December. And Philippine headline inflation eased to 2.1% in February, down from 2.9% in January. The Bangko Sentral says this was below its forecast range and market expectations. However, the year-to-date average inflation rate stands at 2.5%, which is within the government's target range of 2 to 4%. Still, the Bangko Sentral remains cautious of global risks and will consider new information in its policy meeting on April 3rd. So it's all eyes now on policymakers at the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas as inflation slowed more than forecast in February. The big question is, will this finally compel policymakers to cut the key rate on April 3? Let's take a look at how the latest inflation print now stacks up. Take a look at that fall from 2.9% all the way down to 2.1% because of those slower increases in food and utility prices. That's a lot slower than the median that we got at 2.6% from both Business World and Reuters surveys. It is also a lot slower than January's 2.9%. On top of that, 2.1% is also a lot slower than February's inflation estimate, as you can see here, of between 2.2 and 3%. In fact, it's fallen below that range. So last month's print of 2.1% marks the slowest annual increase since September. It is also near the lower end now of the BSP's inflation target of what we've always been talking about, and that's a range of 2 to 4%. Governor Eli Remolona just had 2 words to tell me after the inflation numbers came out, and this is what he said, quoting him. He wrote, "Cathy, it's reassuring. It's words that markets want to hear, and an inflation print that gives the Bangko Sentral a lot more wiggle room from the Federal Reserve, says fixed income expert Dino Aquino.
I think the Philippines can decouple. They are inflation sensitive. If you look at 2019, going back to 2019, when the BSP then cut 75 basis points, they tracked the inflation rate. The inflation rate at that time, the average was 2.5%. And we ended the year in terms of policy rates at 4. So that's the 150 that I mentioned. So we can actually decouple if this inflation trend continues to be favorable moving forward.
With us now for more is Julian Tarobago, the investment mentor and former billion-dollar fund manager, the creator of JT Criterion. So good to see you, June. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me over. It's a pleasure.
It's been such a long time, hasn't it?
Too long.
Too long, but very critical time. We did hear from Dino Aquino yesterday, and he said something that was a little bit contrarian, I thought, that he said we could decouple. The Bangko Sentral could decouple from the Fed rate cutting cycle because of that huge inflation rate decline in February.
Interesting.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think it was very encouraging that even the inflation rate fell below the range. I was looking at your graphic. It was below the range of expectation of the central bank. So if it's below the range, the logic there is they could actually be, more emboldened to cut rates.
Cutting now. Don't wait for April 3rd.
Well, it was a surprise, right? So maybe.
Yeah, but then the gravity as well and the depth of the cut. I mean, people were talking about maybe 25 basis points like they did in the past three meetings before they held steady.
Right.
Is there a possibility that it might be deeper than 25 basis points?
Right. I think 50 is more reasonable, personally speaking. The lower than expected inflation print reinforces that idea, I think. I mean, you have inflation going down. At the end of the day, it's about inflation and GDP, right? So if inflation is going down, the peso is exhibiting more stability, and then eventually it's going to flow into the economy, and I think it's a very encouraging sign that inflation was lower than expected.
Right. Yeah. So after 50 basis points, what's going to come next in the latter half of the year?
I'll stay at 50 basis points for now. I think let's see how inflation pans out. Because
what will be the factors then? I mean, what's keeping that sort of a cloudy scenario for you in the second half of the year?
Well, I just want to see rice prices, for example, continue the slide because I think in your report, I think it was housing price and other food prices were lower than expected. So that was encouraging, and for me, it's encouraging because lower rice prices and all of those other food prices means a continuation of lower inflation, which could help boost. It could provide that much-needed boost in consumption and a rebound in GDP growth. If you recall, the fourth quarter GDP number was a bit of a disappointment. GDP growth number. 5.6%. Yes. So I think that could be a catalyst for the stock market if inflation continues to go down and we see it in terms of a boost to GDP growth, and then you have infrastructure spending accelerating as well, and then corporate earnings continue to the corporate earnings results have so far been quite pedestrian. But if that improves, then I think you see the valuations for it will reinforce that the valuations for Philippine stocks are dirt cheap.
Yeah, there's just so many ifs there. I mean, as we're working through that whole
Let's start with inflation and the 50 basis point cut. Yeah.
Right. But I do want to get to the funds. Sure. You used to hold like billion-dollar funds worth of money, equity fund, the best performing. The last time we talked, that was the longest period since we last spoke. If you had $1 billion right now, how would you deploy, given all the ifs that you just mentioned there?
Right. If I had to deploy in Philippine equities, and I think there's a lot of value. If it's quality, I would put it in consumer. There's a lot of consumer.
Staples or discretionary?
Both. You have Jollibee, for example. CNPF, there's URC is super cheap. Of course, it's not for everyone at this point. Other value plays, JG Summit, JG Summit stake in Meralco its market capitalization of $1.9 billion, I think, is lower than its actual stake in Meralco, which is about $2.5 billion. So it means PLDT stake, Robinson's Land, Cebu Air, or Cebu Pacific, they're all for free.
Okay.
So I mean that's the value that you're getting now, in terms of blue chips that are Ayala Land in property. I said consumer and property is cheap at 23 pesos per share. SM Prime is cheap, so it's actually a great opportunity to buy quality at, I would say, dirt cheap prices. So if you just can extend your investment horizon, I mean, if I don't think this is going to be I think if anyone who invests in the market now on a disciplined basis, I'm not saying put everything there.
Right.
You'll be smiling after 5 years, 3
Okay,
to 5
but
years.
we have to get into your investment course next
Sure.
month, and
Yeah.
I need to have you back then and
Absolutely.
sort out how those ifs change in
Yes.
30 days. But good luck. Thank you so much,
Thank you so
Jun
much, Cathy.
Tarobago, joining us here from JP Criterion. And you're watching Money Talks on One News. Coming right up, Maharlika looks into broadband connectivity projects to invest in next. And U.S. President Donald Trump makes an appeal to Greenland. We have this and more news after the break. Welcome back to Money Talks. I'm Cathy Yang. The Maharlika Investment Fund is looking into broadband connectivity projects for its next investment. Maharlika CEO Rafael Consing says they have not yet spoken with telco companies, but once they close their first 2 deals, they will start exploring broadband investments. Maharlika recently approved a $75.4 million loan for Makilala Mining. It also acquired a 20% stake in Synergy Grid for nearly 20 billion pesos. Consing said it is too early to discuss the details of the connectivity plans, but he said it is one of the key investment priorities. San Miguel Food and Beverage saw a 7% rise in net income in 2024, reaching nearly 41 billion pesos. SMFB Chairman Ramon Ang credits strong brands, market expansion, and innovation for growth. San Miguel Foods led the charge with a 33% increase in net income, reaching over 8 billion pesos. Its packaged food unit, including tender, juicy hot dogs and Magnolia dairy products, saw strong demand. The company continues to expand, driven by strong consumer demand and operational efficiency. SMFB shares now trading up 2% from yesterday's close. Here are the headlines from around the globe. in Greenland as Trump threatens to gain control of the island one way or the other. Its leader is firm that the area is theirs. The Prime Minister made this statement on Facebook Wednesday. Trump has repeatedly expressed interest in owning Greenland, a huge mineral-rich island that sits along strategic sea lanes in the North Atlantic. But an overwhelming number of Greenlanders reject such a move. In China, Premier Li Keqiang says China is firm in implementing one country, two systems policy. Li also vows to advance the cause of China's reunification with the semi-autonomous island of Taiwan. The premier says the parliament will support Hong Kong and Macau's growing economies to attain long-term prosperity and stability. China's iron grip in Hong Kong has caused the erosion of its democracy, while Taiwan is ramping up its military capability in the event of an attack from Beijing. And in the Vatican, Pope Francis' confinement prevented him from presiding over the Ash Wednesday Mass. Instead, Italian prelate Cardinal Angelo De Donatis stood in for him. In the latest health bulletin, the Pope is in stable condition and has no new respiratory crisis. Francis spent much of his day working in his armchair. The Vatican added the Pope would be reconnected again to non-invasive mechanical ventilation after it was removed during the day. So what was it like celebrating Ash Wednesday in Rome amid the Pope's hospitalization? Here's a walkthrough from One News anchor Gretchen Ho.
It was a good start to the Lenten season as the Vatican reported that the Pope remained stable for the second straight day, recording no respiratory insufficiencies. While the prognosis remained guarded, the Pope spent the day in his armchair and even did some work. Meanwhile, I got to spend Ash Wednesday with the top officials of the Vatican. It was a solemn procession that started with the liturgy at Sant Anselmo and then ended with a celebration of a Mass at Basilica di Santa Sabina. Holy Wednesday, with the Vatican's top officials, honored an ancient Roman tradition revived by John XXIII in the 1960s. In a homily read by Cardinal Angelo De Donatis, Pope Francis talked lengthily about human fragility. From dust we were created, and to dust we shall return.
The homily of Pope Francis. We feel deeply united to him in this moment, and we thank him for the offering of his prayer and the sufferings for the good of the whole Church and the whole world. The holy ashes tonight will be scattered on our heads. These revive in us the memory of what we are, but also the hope of what we will be.
Dan Arancina, a Filipino sacristan who served the Pope for 5 years, recalls his experience at the St. Peter's Basilica.
Very kind. Every Sunday after the Mass of the 12:15, he comes to visit us, and he gives us like a little prayer for everybody, and always smile on his face. Whenever we had a chance to meet him, we wanted to give some gifts, and he always receives.
His parents, Danilo and Annalisa, also shared that they felt special concern from the Pope.
Mahal niya ang mga kabataan at kaya lagi niyang tinatanong kung inaalagaan ba sila ng ayos, pinapakain ba.
Founders, venture capitalists, and innovators, listen up. If you are hesitating to just do it or carry on with it, think again. Because our next guest says entrepreneurs need to ultimately push through, despite the overriding uncertainty and volatility we've been talking about over the past 20 minutes. So with us for more, straight from Seattle, is Earl Martin Valencia. He's the co-author of this book you're seeing now, Startup Mindsets. He is also executive member of NEDA's National Innovation Council and co-chair of the Philippine Awards. Welcome back to Manila, Earl, and thank you so much for joining us. Congratulations on the new book.
Thanks for having me. I'm definitely great. It's great to be back and also talk about my favorite topic, which is innovation.
Right. Well, our favorite topic right now has been MAGA, Make America Trump Again. And you've just come back from Seattle. Could you give us a bit of an overview first of what it feels like living and working in Seattle, being Filipino?
Yeah, so I think it's definitely a time where a lot of people are taking stock of what does it mean for me? What does it mean for my, let's say, family abroad? And also as a business person, what does it mean for me to plan my business over the next, to be honest, maybe 3 to 4 years, right? And, there's two sides of the coin, right? Like, for example, my book, Startup Mindsets, one of the things we say is, in an environment of extreme uncertainty, how do you just push forward, right? How do you understand what is in front of you and how do you adjust? But, in practical purposes, now you have to evaluate two things, like flow of capital and flow of talent.
And that you can't. You can't right now. There's just too much uncertainty. But
Exactly.
how are you making sense of it?
Yeah, so I think the best thing really is to plan multiple scenarios, right? I think every good entrepreneur, to be honest, and every good, let's say, investment portfolio manager, always have to think about, best case, worst case, and the base scenario. And I think, to be honest, as business leaders, you just have to do it right now more than ever.
Right, that's the message you really want to send here with the Philippine Innovation Awards. The entrants have 15 days to go before
right.
they submit entries, and you specifically want them in 3 areas, very critical areas, in fact, in food, education, and health. But why these particular areas?
Yeah, so I'm part of the National Innovation Council. I was appointed by the president a year and a half ago. And one of the missions of the council is how do you use innovation to solve the most pressing needs of the country, but also at the same time, what are the areas we could potentially lead globally? So those are the 2 filters. And we felt that if we think about those 2 filters, what is the Philippine needs and what can we lead? It's really in food and agriculture, how do you think about healthcare in the large population, and really how do we educate the population, especially in this growing new trends of technology and rapid change. The old rage is about artificial intelligence and what is the impact to us here in the Philippines, for example, and how do we educate the population based on that?
Okay, so if you're a Filipino entrepreneur based here, and then you're looking at Make America Great Again from this distance or this perspective, how should they think?
Yeah, I think, there's a couple ways to think about it. One is, what can you control, right? And to be honest, what you can control is your execution in your specific markets right now. So if you're focused, let's say, in the Philippines, then how do you make sure that your home base is protected first before you think about international expansion? The other one really is maybe from sources of capital, maybe going to the US, is it the right place for you to find capital or not? There might be other places in the world where you have to look, and that's the creativity that you have to think about as an entrepreneur in this uncertain environment.
Right, and that is the aim of this program, where money talks. We're just following the money right there. Thank you so much for joining us, Earl, and all the best on Philippine Innovation Awards.
Perfect.
Let us in on who won, because that's going to be in October, I believe.
Exactly, yeah. I'll be
Appreciate
back
it.
in October.
Safe travels, Earl. Signal subscribers now have more entertainment options with the addition of Disney Plus to its lineup. Viewers can stream movies and series from Disney, Pixar, Marvel, Star Wars, and National Geographic. K-drama fans can also binge award-winning titles like Moving and Light Shopkeeper, while Hollywood favorites like Grey's Anatomy and Shogun are also available. Signal offers Disney Plus access through its Family Time Bundle 700 or as an add-on starting at 495 pesos a month. For more details, visit www.signal.tv or check out Signal TV on Facebook. And before we go, I've got a new phone for you, crafted for a very specific function. Meet the Sonim XP Pro Thermal 5G smartphone. No, I'm not selling it, but you heard it right. It's a thermal smartphone. It's meant to work in tough environments, I'm told, withstand water and dust, and even be dropped from a very high level because it's shockproof. Some smartphones have those functions, but this one has thermal imaging in it. So what do I need it for? Users can scan for heat signatures and be helpful also for technicians who can look at overloaded circuits with this phone. Or plumbers can detect leaked or blocked pipes. Home inspectors can also see leaking pot pipes or missing insulation with it. Or maybe we could also ask it whether a rate cut is coming on April 3rd. Maybe we should ask the governor. And that is it for Money Talks with Cathy Yang. Catch us again tomorrow, 9:30 a.m. here on One News. Have a great day ahead.